Tonight's session, as you know, is all about creatine, which I think it's fair to say is probably one of the most talked about supplements in the category at the moment, but particularly when we start looking at its potential for midlife. And we're going to dive right in, really focusing on unpicking some of the myths that are out there, but really focusing on it as a lens for us to explore as females navigating midlife, but also when we're looking at Healthspan as well. Before we get into the detail of this evening and I hand over to the wonderful Dr. Martins, I've got a few safety notes, as those of you who've joined these sessions before will know. So the first thing to always be aware of with an MPOWDER Masterclass is although we get the most preeminent experts into the room with you, nothing discussed or explored in today's masterclass should be taken personally. And what I mean by that is it should not be a replacement for diagnosis or treatment by a medical practitioner. So we will be sharing information and we will be reflecting generally. And we will be able to take questions from the floor. But if you are asking questions within chat, please couch those in a general way to protect both yourself and Dr. Martins as well. The other thing I always like to flag is alongside obviously ensuring that these sessions are as accessible as possible to all members of our community, I'm also very conscious that sometimes we're talking about topics that are a little bit sensitive too. So the chat function is there for you. If you want to stay anonymous, you can toggle to just panelists and host, and that means that Dr. Martins and I will be the only people that see your message. If you're comfortable for it to be seen by everyone and read out by that strange man, you can toggle to everybody as well. But if your privacy is something you want to protect, we completely understand. And those of you that haven't come to an MPOWDER Masterclass, or maybe you've not met us before as a brand, I just want to introduce MPOWDER a little bit as well. We are a brand built firmly for the future of midlife. We create beautiful supplements that are the brainchild of Dr. Martins, but we also do a lot of research into botanicals and functional medicine too. And we work with a whole blend of experts because we really do believe that midlife and health span actually is a whole body and mind experience. So at our core, we are a co-invention community. Thousands of women have shaped what support really looks like when it comes to hormones, health, and what happens next. And really, that's what these masterclasses are about too. Many of you might have found your way here as a result of purchasing from our supplements, but you may also have just found us on Instagram. I'm always very aware of that as well. And if that is you, welcome. You've come to a very lovely community. But it's also such a delight to have you here because I never underestimate the effort it takes to put yourself first. And whatever happened 10 minutes before joining tonight, this session is absolutely for you. It's about nourishment, support, and a healthy dose of curiosity. Tonight, we are going to be talking to Dr. Martins, who will be a familiar face to those of you that have been part of our community for some time. As I alluded to earlier, she's the brainchild of our formulations, and we're so lucky to have her as part of our community. She's a naturopath, she's a herbalist, she's a lifestyle medicine practitioner, and she's our resident science lead. And so that means when we're talking about something like creatine, what she brings to that discussion is the rigor that I would always want as a researcher myself in terms of what science tells us, but also that curiosity as a herbalist who's worked with plants, compounds for a very long time and understands how they work in the real world. So what we never do is overestimate what we do know, what science tells us, but we also never underestimate the power of Mother Nature and also the wisdom of many of these protocols that are often handed down generation to generation and used for a long time, actually amongst functional medicine practitioners who often are trained as medical practitioners as well. So that's the approach we're going to be taking to the conversation around creatine tonight. So I really hope it's a balanced unpicking of myths and a sort of route to you understanding better whether it may be something that you want to add to your supplement stack. Dr. Martins, thank you for giving us your time this evening. I want to dive right into the conversation. And for those of you happy to communicate on chat and the risk of this gentleman shouting things very loudly in our ear, do let me know if there are things as we go through this evening that you want me to pull into the conversation. But there'll also be 15 minutes at the end, as always, for you to pick our brains in a little bit more detail. But let's dive right in. I actually wanted to start tonight because I always assume that because we're so embedded in the world of lifestyle medicine and herbal synergy and all of the things that we bring to the way that we approach our thinking, that it's something that everybody is cognizant of. And the reality is these words are often used in very different ways, especially when we're looking at social media. So I wanted you to start by perhaps explaining what lifestyle medicine brings when we're thinking about how we optimize our health, particularly as women in midlife, and what are the sort of foundational components that we should all look to prioritize when we're considering health span, particularly?
First of all, I want to say hi to everyone before starting. I always love having sessions with MPOWDER with you, Rebecca, because everything flows so naturally. It just feels
It is home.
It is home. So let's start with lifestyle medicine because it really frames what we're going to discuss here today. What I really love about lifestyle medicine is that it puts us in charge of our own health. So it's very realistic, down to earth, and I like to think of it as a way for us to realize that there are no magic pills. So it's almost like that magic is in us. And that gives us a lot of power, and that is very beautiful. This is extremely empowering because although we know that genetics, the environment, and other factors can impact our health, when we frame it around lifestyle medicine, it really puts us in the center. It gives us a really active role, meaning that we have far more influence than we realize. So, and starting today, when we embrace this mindset and hopefully can incorporate some tools, this can positively influence our health span. So how do we do that? And I just want to highlight, which I think is really powerful and special about lifestyle medicine, is that it is such a well-researched branch of medicine. There are plenty of very large clinical trials showing the health benefits in so many areas, including the prevention, management, and even reversing and chronic diseases. To name one, type 2 diabetes, as extremely successful with type 2 diabetes. And so what are these pillars? They have 6 pillars. I'm going to talk about 5. The other one is avoiding harmful substances, which can be obviously a topic on its own. But the main one is nutrition, so diet. Finding a diet that is sustainable, healthy. Lifestyle medicine is very focused on a plant-based diet. Doesn't mean that you have to eat only a plant-based diet, but even if you eat meat, really incorporating a variety of plants, it's really key. Then sleep, we know it's so important. So it's about prioritizing it and making sure we have our 7-8 hours of quality sleep as much as we can. And then stress, it's another one. So we all know about the negative impact of stress in our bodies. So that has such an impact on our health span. So stress is such an important one, and it's just about us being aware of it, understanding how we can manage it and what can work for us, because we are all different. So stress is a big one as well. And the other one is movement. So I'd like to talk about movement rather than exercise, because I feel that sometimes that can put a lot of pressure or feel really big to some people, but it's just about us keeping ourselves moving. And there's social connections. So I love this aspect because it's really showing this integrative approach that lifestyle medicine brings, where they put together the physical, the mental, but also the social aspects of health. So when we look at how it all works together, then we can see that lifestyle medicine really recognizes that exercise, sleep, stress, relationships, they all interact with one another. So for instance, if we have poor sleep, then it's going to affect our food choices. Or if we are under stress, particularly chronic stress, that can influence our physical activity. We may be obviously less likely to want to engage with physical activity. And social isolation is a big one, which can really impact on mental and physical health. So to summarize, and now bringing to the perspective of health span, I like to think of a lifestyle medicine as an approach that honors the concept of aging well as opposed of fighting aging. And I think this is so important. I find it liberating just when I think about it or I say these words. It just feels like it feels right, because it's unrealistic, really, and unhelpful to fight aging. It's such a natural process. It's like breathing. So we want to have energy. We want to be able to move, ideally pain-free. We want to be able to digest our foods and absorb those nutrients. We want to be able to use our brains properly for as long as possible. And the tools that I just talked about really make all the difference. And when we think about this and about aging in a positive way, because if we feel in a place where we are healthier, we have more balance, it's almost like it gives us also the mental and the physical space to embrace important qualities that I think that come with aging, particularly for women. Women have a different connection with these elements. We are more likely to have more wisdom, self-knowledge, emotional regulation, and purpose. And I think being in a good place later in life gives us so much more ability to navigate these areas that hopefully will be thriving.
I love it. And I wanted to go broad. For those of you joining and wanting to get into the weeds of creatine, I really did want to take Dr. Martens out because I want to talk about creatine as a compound and why there's so much buzz around it. But I want to talk about it from that broader lens because we are a community navigating midlife and beyond. And what's piqued the interest of many of this community is some of the emerging research around creatine, which has very swiftly taken it from what was historically quite a sort of a gym bro and then a silicon bro and quite a male dominated compound in terms of focus and marketing and sales to something that we're all becoming curious about because of its potential around health span. So can you talk to us about what creatine is, Dr. Martens? And again, for all of us listening tonight, just keep in mind that lifestyle medicine philosophy, because we're going to be returning to that when we get a little bit deeper into the weeds as well. But talk to me about what creatine is and why it's so important when we're looking broadly at health span.
So I will start with creatine really as a compound before we go into the supplementation side of things. So creatine is a naturally occurring compound. So we can get it from foods, mainly animal-based. We get it from red meat and fish, particularly. Our bodies can also produce some creatine, but keeping in mind that also it will also need building blocks, meaning amino acids. So that's something to keep in mind for anyone that was following a plant-based diet. So this is how creatine can basically get into our bodies or be produced in our bodies beyond supplementation. Why is important? Why do we actually have it, or why do we need it in our bodies? The purpose of creatine is it helps our cells to produce rapid energy. So in other words, helps our body to regenerate, which is a sort of primary energy currency that cells use. And this is very relevant for tissues in the body that have a high demand of energy, such as the muscles is the main one, and the brain. And that's why it is important for those. Or in fact, 95% of creatine is stored in muscles, while the remaining is stored in different organs, including the brain and the heart. And it helps muscles contract more efficiently. Also, when the brain has a higher demand of energy, creatine can also help. And it helps cells maintain an energy balance. So it's like an energy power to the body. Creatine supplements have been classically associated with athletes and rebuilding because it helps to build strength and muscle mass. But Healthspan research is particularly interested in creatine now because we know that it helps to preserve key functions that tend to decline with age. And they are also very relevant for women in midlife and going through menopause. And so that's one of the reasons we're also so interested, obviously, to bring it here in our community and discuss it. Shall we look at how it works, Rebecca?
I'd just like to return as well, because we're always food first, aren't we? So we'll always say, if you can find compounds or ingredients and easily introduce them to your plate, then that would always be our recommendation. And I think the thing to flag is, although it's found in food like red meat and fish, it's actually quite hard to consume the amount that you'd want to consume, even to get that 3 to 5 grams, which is a therapeutic dosage level where most of the creatine studies have been done. And I also understand there's some challenges as well when it's in food in terms of our ability to absorb it well.
Yes, with foods, if you want to put it into perspective, in order to get the 3 to 5 grams, which is the amount of creatine we have seen clinical trials to bring the health benefits, we would need to have a kilogram of beef or salmon daily. Quite unrealistic. We also know that the cooking process can degrade creatine. So again, I've touched on vegetarian or vegan diets. Those would not get any creatine from food. They can then use it if they have a diet that has some variety in terms of having beans, lentils, and nuts and seeds. And soya, for instance, has the complete amino acid profile, but you need to look into how to combine foods to get the amino acids that you need for your body to produce. And then it will produce. It produces actually a similar around 1 to 2 grams daily. So someone on a vegan diet can obviously have their creatine being produced. But the issue is that creatine is stored in the muscles. And when you actually don't supplement, but either through diet or through your body producing it, you just compensating for your daily use of creatine, if that makes sense. Recycling mechanism. But you don't have a chance to create stores
To optimize, yeah.
And that is also more of an issue as we age, because then we are less likely to have optimal reserves. So that
Really
is
helpful.
one of the reasons.
Thank you.
And so looking at the why is so important, we look at all the benefits we can get, particularly in midlife. One can really consider supplementation. And the thing about creatine, which I really acknowledge, is that it's one of the most well-studied and safe supplements to take. There's plenty of research, and the contraindications are really minimal, which obviously some we will discuss later as well, some potential side effects, but it's a very safe supplement. So it makes it an attractive option to take either on its own or alongside other supplements or as part of a formulation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's dig into it in a little bit more detail. You've talked about what it helps us do. Do you want to dig into that a little bit more beyond the physical piece? I think we're used to having perspective on its physical function, but let's go into those benefits that science is now helping us understand better.
Yes, when we start with the muscle, the fact that it increases muscle mass and strength, that actually provides almost the foundation for so many other health benefits. It's really helpful, but in midlife in particular, because it helps to maintain muscle mass and strength. One of the biggest threats to healthy aging is sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. So by helping us to preserve that muscle mass, load, and function, we are looking at having better mobility, better metabolic health. It reduces the risk of falls and fractures. The benefits are huge. Then we can also think it's sort of a vicious cycle of positive benefits, because it also helps
An unvicious cycle,
Yes.
a virtuous circle.
How do you call it?
A virtuous
A
circle.
vicious cycle. Okay.
Yes, we can have that.
It helps us to exercise more effectively, so increases our physical function, meaning that you can have the chance to train more or train more effectively and stick to a training program in a way that you may not be able to do it if you're feeling tired, you don't have the energy. And then it's also helpful with the recovery, the post-training recovery. So it brings that element of helping you to be more effective and have a healthier training. And that also helps to produce, obviously, the more you train, you also get more muscle mass. And it's that positive cycle I was talking about. And that with that, we can extrapolate to also having more muscle mass means that you are going to improve your bone health.
Yes.
Which is another area that is very important for women in midlife, because as our hormones change, again, we are at risk of losing our bone mass, or we do lose our bone mass, but there are obviously ways to help. But by improving our muscle mass, we are working towards that, because the muscle creates healthy stress on bones. So it actually improves bone formation. And then we can think of metabolic health. That's a really interesting one, because again, another key area related to aging, but very critical for us women in midlife, as our blood sugar regulation starts to be affected, insulin sensitivity, this can also be helped by increasing our muscle mass. So another indirect effect. And then the other big area is brain health. There is very good emergency evidence showing that creatine can also improve cognitive function, particularly in people that are sleep deprived or are going through a period of stress or high mental demand.
Really interesting. I just want to a little bit, because I was at the HX Health Summit over the weekend, and it was really interesting listening to some of the leading voices in that longevity and health span space. And one of the big reflections I had coming away from a weekend of listening to research papers and insights was, it's almost like I feel like sometimes the health space and the wellness space can get so complicated, and supplements are pushed at us, routines are pushed at us, interventions, protocols. And what I found really interesting is that these people at the forefront of it have almost gone full virtuous circle as well, Vera, in that they've gone from being all into this 5 a.m. wake and cold plunges and meditation for an hour and then journaling and then, their bullet coffee, actually going, do you know what? It's all about the systems that are sitting underneath. And there's a simplicity when you move beyond symptom to system. And I feel when you're talking about creatine, to a certain extent, yes, there's all this interest emerging, but actually, if you look at what the system benefit is, it's this kind of domino effect, isn't it, of the impact it has in a certain area, and then how the fact that our biochemistry is so clever that by doing something over here, you're optimizing for a whole chain reaction that then occurs, because that's just the way our body works. And that really helps me think in terms of simplicity, because I think with creatine as a discussion as well, when we think about it from that system perspective, it makes absolute sense. What I don't like is when it becomes a silver bullet that's going to cure everything, because we also know that it requires an element of action on our part. That kind of muscle mass piece is optimized further by us moving. And that's why I wanted to start with the lifestyle medicine conversation, because it's then when you're looking at those pillars, it's how we as individuals take agency for the stuff we're putting in our bodies so that we supplement. But that the whole term, the whole category is it's additive rather than the silver bullet. And I think that's really important as we're exploring whether that could be an intervention that's useful for you. So kind of keep that in mind when we're talking through. I know that we've covered the conversation around why creatine is something that we're advocating for, because we're such a food first community. We're usually talking in terms of supplements that are led by botanicals that you can't usually get onto your plate. And creatine is something that we've become increasingly interested in because of all the reasons that you've described, Vera. So I want to actually skip ahead if we can and talk in a little bit more detail about the fact that I put a post up the other day saying I kind of feel like the world didn't need another creatine supplement, because actually we know as researchers that there are formats when it comes to creatine, but actually let's break down what you should be looking for. If you're standing in your supermarket aisle, as I was the other week, and genuinely, I kid you not, and I know I'm prone to exaggeration, but there were like 20 different buckets of creatine. And I was looking at them, I was thinking, these are all the same, right? So tell me what we should be looking for when we look at creatine. What format is best and why?
That's the other thing about creatine. It's simple, actually. Creatine doesn't have a lot really to mess around. Basically, we know the best form of creatine is creatine monohydrate. That's it. So I go a little bit into detail why, but basically when you're looking for creatine, look for this version. One thing when you're talking in terms of how people can search for a good product that made me think is that looking at creatine maybe as part of a formulation is just be aware of what else comes with it. Because it being a powder, a lot of products that are powder based really like to add additives that are quite unhelpful, being artificial sweeteners or anything could potentially not agree with you. So it's important to understand what you have.
Yes.
The additives would be the things to be careful about. If there are active ingredients there, they're there for a reason. So it's just a question of understanding if they're suitable. But just keep that in mind. Just because a product says creatine doesn't mean that the product is just creatine. Then is also the amount, how much. Some products will ask you to suggest a particular dose that is quite high, that is likely to cause potentially side effects. So just knowing your, let's say, optimal range and safe range is also important. So if you know that you prepared when you go and read the back of a product, that you can always question that, let's put it that way.
What else might they see, Vera? Because I know that I went in there, there's buffered creatine, there's liquid creatine, is it hydrochloride as well? And my understanding is that none of these actually have had any superior outcomes compared with the monohydrate, and it's actually the monohydrate that is the best. Is that correct?
Yes, again, that's it. It's clear, it's simple. The monohydrate is the one that has been used in all these clinical trials that so in terms of being effective, decades of research backing it up. It's really the benchmark against all the other forms, as we would say, is the gold standard. None of the other forms have produced consistently results that are near as good as the ones that have been shown with creatine monohydrate. Some of them even actually didn't show any positive effects. So I think it's quite straightforward. It's creatine monohydrate.
Keep it clean, keep it simple. I want to talk a little bit now about, alongside the buzz around creatine, there are obviously some concerns, particularly for us as females. You touched upon it a little bit. I think a lot of it comes down to the dosage, and more is always better. Before we get into that, could you give me a perspective on what I see as the top three? And when we were building up to tonight's session and talking to people in our community, the questions they were asking me. And the first one actually is twofold. It's one, am I going to gain weight on it? Because I think some people who've tried it, that may have been an experience where they feel bloated or bulky and uncomfortable, and they do see the scales shift. So can you talk to us about that as a concern that we may have?
So that aspect of people feeling maybe they get more bulky or whether they be potentially getting more weight, it can happen temporarily, which is usually due to water retention within the muscles, but is not fat gain. So one thing to keep in mind is that it's temporary, but also very important and helpful for us to, obviously, as I was touching on those, is to understand that is more likely to happen if people do a loading phase. So we hear a lot the term loading phase when it comes to, and what it means is that to take a higher amount of creatine when you start. So instead of the 3 to 5 grams per day, which is what has been shown to be effective in clinical trials, people may take 20 grams per day for the first week and then phase it down. Some people stay on 10 grams, particularly people that have like a PT, they may take suggestions from a personal trainer and be on a higher amount. I've seen that in clinic. That loading phase can lead to that, and that's possible to avoid. Also because if you think about creatine is something that you take not to get an immediate result. It's really the kind of supplement that benefits from long-term use. So it builds up, it has a cumulative effect, because the key thing is taking it regularly, consistently. That's how you're going to help to increase creatine stores in your body.
So the loading phase is almost trying to shortcut that, which is what we always love as hackers. So we'll go in and we'll do the 20 grams in that attempt to load our bodies more swiftly than a consistent daily dose, which actually allow those stores to come in a way that our body is much more able to cope with.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way to accelerate that first stage. But I think if you're looking at it in the long term, you don't really need to do that. And staying hydrated is a really important thing that goes really creatine. So obviously the standard would be 1.5 to 2 liters. We're talking more about 2 liters here if we are taking creatine. But depends obviously on many factors, like where you're living, how hot it is like today, how much you exercise, your age. That's one thing to also keep in mind when you're taking creatine. So, and actually to touch on what you were saying before, Rebecca, that's what I really like about creatine as well, because it helps us really to also adopt healthy, to make hydration, protein intake, the training, all of these things is what makes creatine also work. So if you just take creatine and you don't do one of there's at least, it's really like this combination of the optimal protein intake, optimal hydration, and optimal training that really elevates the potential of creatine. So there's the job. So it's a partnership between you and creatine.
What I love about creatine, because I've been playing with it for the last couple of years, and we'll come to explain why in a minute. But what for me it was, again, going back to that lifestyle lens, is for me it became an unlock for other healthy habits. To your point, I felt there was no point me introducing this thing, having done all the research and looked into it as a compound, without hooking it to a commitment to do these other things. And obviously I have the benefit of talking to you regularly, and for me it was introducing the protein, the hydration piece, and also accepting that it didn't have to be working and always lifting heavy in the gym. It was about moving my body. And then actually, when you get more energy stores, the desire to lift heavy will probably come. But it's that whole, again, back to that chain reaction of how systems work and how we as individuals can take agency to that. Maybe think of creatine as your unlock, as that thing that unlocks your brain to actually introduce other habits. I'm conscious of time, but I want to kind of touch on these other perceived or experienced side effects from our community. The other one actually that we talked a lot about within our community is an upset gut. And again, I think actually, to be fair, a lot of that was to do with this loading that we're being encouraged to do on social media. But can you talk to me about its ability to cause digestive issues? And I think we as women navigating midlife will often have gut issues and a gut microbiota that we're trying to nourish as well. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I believe it's a mild effect, particularly if you're not doing a loading phase. This loading phase is what can cause a lot of issues. So if you are on a more conservative and reasonable dose, you would be quite okay, but everyone is different, and midlife makes us more. And if there is history, so all of this to keep in mind. And it's just about being mindful, because if those symptoms are there, or certainly appear while taking creatine, one may want to take action, and there are options, there are things we can do to help. Again, this can be temporary, but the symptoms that may be more common that are digestive related would be just digestive discomfort, meaning like you have that sense of something is not right, makes you bloated, nausea. Some people may actually have changes in their bowel movements, more towards loose stools. So how you can avoid this is to avoid the loading dose. We also know that taking creatine on an empty stomach may make things worse. So about having it with food or after food, which is something that we advocate anywhere at MPOWDER, often to take your supplements with food or after. And just make sure, because it's a powder that is well mixed, because sometimes if you don't mix it well, especially if it's like a powder with other ingredients, I know it sounds like really a basic thing, but it can actually make a difference. Make sure you dilute it properly, that is homogeneous, the solution, and not clumpy, because then if you have clumps of creatine, that can be more upsetting for the stomach. So that's
really help.
when it comes to gut. I think that's the main things to be aware of.
And the final point before we get into the optimizing of a supplement stack, and we're always looking to simplify things at MPOWDER, and also, everything that we add has to work really hard because we're living in a world that just feels increasingly expensive. It's not just complicated, it's really expensive to live and to navigate and to try and be healthy today. Talk to me a little bit about how much we actually need. You touched there on what the evidence-based recommended daily dose is. Can you just give us a little bit more detail on that?
It's 3 to 5 grams. I think you can play with that. What I would recommend, even some people even start with less, like that loading phase. They do the opposite. Some people start with 2 grams for a week just to make sure they don't get side effects, and then they can build, and then you can go up to 5 if you tolerate, obviously, and you may not be achieving results as you expect. So you can play between 3 and 5 grams. I think I wouldn't go above that because there is no evidence that you need more. And again,
And I think it's back to that mindset thing, isn't it? Because we see it all over social media, and also there's all the benefits of the load. But actually, it really helps to know that what they're trying to do is shortcut the bank that you're building consistently. So really, what you're saying is you still achieve the same ultimate output in terms of optimization. It's just you're loading, you're contributing to that bank in a much more steady fashion rather than trying to cash it all in at the beginning, which is how our world is making us feel like we have to behave, isn't it? I love the fact that I hadn't appreciated that actually by doing the consistency piece, we still achieve the outcomes that are being talked about a lot on social media. It's just going to be with perhaps less of the hardships that people experience in terms of side effects as well. So I want to come on to talk about an optimal supplement stack, because again, at MPOWDER, we're all about simplicity and not adding. And this is probably the first time in 2 years we've had an open conversation about adding something into your supplement stack in addition to the stuff we advocate, and obviously the MPOWDER's family of formulations where we've been really careful only to create where we see an absence of really good stuff in the market, or we see an absence in the ability to get the compounds that we're recommending on your plate, which is why we obviously work with rare and interesting botanicals as well. But if you were thinking about an optimal stack for health span and longevity, and you had creatine as that kind of foundation, as you say, it's simple, it's the monohydrate option, what else would you be adding to it to help optimize perhaps its performance?
so I would say that vitamin D and magnesium in the form of glycinate. Well, vitamin D with K2 and magnesium glycinate would be almost non-negotiable.
Okay.
Because the benefits of vitamin D are endless, and we are likely to be deficient, particularly in the UK. The amount of people I've seen in clinic that have health issues that have been, to some extent, obviously addressed by correcting the levels of vitamin D, it's endless. I find it really shocking, actually, with vitamin D. And I think it's such a simple one to take. It's very cost effective. It's difficult to overdose on vitamin D as well, obviously, unless you are on a really high dose for a long time. But so vitamin D, yes. So non-negotiable with K2. In the context of longevity, we are thinking of vitamin D is essential for our bone health, so for bone formation. And together with K2, they work as a team. And so without vitamin D, we will really be in trouble in terms of our bone health. It's also very important for immunity. And when we think of immunity, it's not just about colds. One may think about autoimmune conditions. I've seen, obviously, there is a link there, and I've seen it in clinic as well. And these are all things that, again, the body, the systems, as we age, there are more challenges. So we want to keep all these areas supported as much as possible. So it branches many areas like bone health, immunity, mental health. So it's really important for mood, for energy. So vitamin D, and then the magnesium piece. Again, magnesium works as a part of the team that helps with bone health, muscle health, actually. So going back to the muscle and why it enhances the work of creatine as well. Magnesium, particularly women in midlife, are likely to be deficient. We need magnesium to deal with stress, to deal with daily life, but then actually stress and a lifestyle that actually people that tend to be more on the fight or flight response, they are more likely to be depleted of magnesium. So you really need that magnesium support. Magnesium helps as well with the nervous system. It helps with managing the effects of stress, regulates our cortisol, helps with sleep. It's just so important. Again, energy is a big part of what magnesium does. Magnesium is a really key supplement if you're thinking of longevity. Maybe sometimes people can be on a high amount for a while, depending on the symptoms, but a maintenance dose of magnesium daily, it makes sure that your levels of magnesium don't get depleted.
We have a final question about creatine tonight. And obviously tonight is quite a special evening for us. For those of you that have been watching us on Instagram today, and those of you who may be already subscribed to our newsletter or subscribed to our formulations, you will know that we launched a new product today. It's our first product in 2 years. I know, being a baby of yours for a long time, I've obviously been a birthing partner for a long time. And back to my point in the beginning of the session, we never come into the market with something that you can get adequately or brilliantly elsewhere. In fact, we always advocate for brands that we love in other places as well. So we've never wanted to compete, really. As a co-invention community, our job is to find where there are gaps, the way we think we could do something more special with our love of botanicals and lifestyle medicine. And that really is what ExtraMila is about. The challenge I set Dr. Martens was, what if we looked at creatine through a female midlife lens? Because although it is beneficial to everybody, so much of the conversation and so much of the research, actually, although there's emerging research now around postmenopausal women, was originally done on men, unsurprisingly. And what about the wonderful world of botanicals? When we look at muscle mass, when we think about our brains, when we think about metabolic health, could we look to take creatine as a foundation rather than the star of the show, and bring botanicals to play that would really enhance what creatine's potential is, but also, back to again our other driving purpose as a business, give you so much in a daily scoop that you can retire other things, but hopefully see a much higher impact in terms of what this daily scoop of creatine plus does for you. So can you talk to us, Vera, about what we've done with ExtraMila and the additional botanicals and what they give us? If you're looking to explore creatine, it may be worth looking at ExtraMila as an option as you're exploring your supplement stack.
ExtraMila has been carefully formulated to include creatine, but combined with those beautiful botanicals and vitamins and minerals that are key. Looking at what could elevate the potential of creatine here, thinking Healthspan, I prioritized botanicals that have strong antioxidant effects. And they bring that support in terms of cardiometabolic health, meaning that they help with cardiovascular health, they help with blood sugar regulation, which are really important aspects of us aging well. The key herbs here playing that role are maritime pine bark extract, an extract that has shown a lot of potential in clinical trials, bringing these qualities, has been shown to improve cholesterol levels, has been shown to improve skin, so skin hydration and skin elasticity, has also shown to improve cognitive function, including in all these aspects in menopausal women. And then we have other two really powerful ingredients in terms of the antioxidant properties they bring, which is amla, also known as Indian gooseberry, and acai berry. And they work synergistically. So it's this concept that we use very much with our formulations, that herbs work together in a way that it maximizes their health benefits and also allows us to work at conservative doses, which helps us to use these herbs longer. Then the piece that comes with the antioxidant potential. And what it's really interesting as well is the supplement can help with potential side effects of creatine, like we discussed, more around gut health. Also, if we think about the population that might be taking creatine or women in midlife, we are likely to be obviously struggling with weight. So there will be potential side effects as well of being on a particular diet or training, which again goes back to the muscle mass. We discussed that's why creatine is important, but also things like skin. We were really big on bringing elements that help with skin.
Skin is so important to our community in terms of collagen reduction in midlife, but that sense that sort of almost overnight we see that play out on our skin. And I know, a bit like the Dracobell New that we have in PeriBoost, the potential of these ingredients to help us produce collagen and to manage elasticity and hydration is really strong.
Yeah, so we brought that element in this blend as well. And then the digestive support is really important. Here we have herbs, ginger, which is a favorite of ours. We have it in other blends because it's so good and so well researched. So ginger and marshmallow root, and those are really good at helping with potential side effects, both that are linked to digestive discomfort, nausea, helping with regular bowel movements. All of this can be part of this blend as well. So all this digestive support, as Rebecca was saying, We wanted to bring creatine into the world, but with a little bit more of support. And I think, again, people could potentially take all these things separately, but it's not necessarily something that people can, without doing the research, understand what this is out there that can actually increase the potential of creatine or can potentially reduce side effects, and how can we put all of this together in a safe way, in a way that can be potentially taken longer term. So this is ExtraMila.
I see ExtraMila, and the reason we've called it that obviously is because it does more, but also because I always feel so passionately that we as females do more. And we wanted to create something that would be much more supportive of that overarching health span proposition that I think is something that we increasingly focus on as we start navigating. I always feel like in perimenopause, we're just like, oh, stop the bus, let me get off. And then as we start managing that hormone roller coaster, it really is about health span and how we can optimize to that. It's been a lovely evening. It's such a gorgeous treat to hang out with this community. I love it. Thank you to all of you for joining on what has been a very hot evening. I hope you do have the chance to try ExtraMila. And Vera, thank you as always for bringing your wisdom to the session tonight.
Thank you, everyone, as well.
Thank you.